Following the central bank's order to commercial banks and financial institutions on Monday to deduct a 0.5% cybersecurity levy from every electronic transaction, with few exemptions stated, many Nigerians have expressed disapproval on various digital media platforms. And now we have a tweet. Serap, of course, did tweet about this. There are several other reactions. Let's take a look at some of the tweets of Nigerians sharing their reactions to this. But it's important to note that there has been confusion about whether it's 0.5% or 0.05. But just to mention that it's 0.5%, which is equivalent of 0.005. I mean, there's been a lot of confusions regarding that, but that's a conversation that we're going to talk about. We'll share with you the tweets much later as we progress with the show.
Absolutely, and of course, it also says that financial institutions will deduct the levy and remit it to the National Cybersecurity Fund administered by the Office of the NSA. Of course, SERAP, the Socioeconomic Rights and Accountability Project, has also issued a warning to the federal government to reverse the 0.5% cybersecurity levy. The CBN, in its memo, has stated a number of exemptions to the levy, as well as a reason and procedure for the deduction. We're joined this morning by financial analyst Kalu Adja to discuss the implications and intricacies of the new cybersecurity levy. Good morning, and thanks for joining us.
How you doing, guys? Good morning.
All right. I mean, the current administration, when they came in, a lot of people had already had this narrative about, increasing IGR as one of the, their modes of operation. So, maybe many people aren't necessarily shocked about this, but let's start with, where you think this is coming from. Do you think that this is part of the whole idea, the fixation on IGR and ways to raise money for the country?
Yeah, well, overall, if you look at Nigeria's tax to GDP, it's very, very low. So we have to get taxes up. I think the issue is how and when we're doing it. Right now, we're in the midst of a stagflation, which is high inflation, high unemployment. Wages are stagnant. You see NLC going on the streets for higher wages, and nothing seems to be increasing the welfare of the workers. But we're getting taxes every day. So I don't think it's necessarily the type of tax Nigerians are worried about, but the fact that their cost of living in Nigeria is just going up, really. So if you keep on taxing without giving Nigerians an increase in wages, on productivity, then of course you're taking away their wealth. There has to be a point when Nigerians say, hey, can we really afford to keep on paying this high tax? That's what's going on. So it's just too many taxes. We knew there would be IGR. We knew that taxes have to go up. But I think it's coming too fast, too soon. I think in the last 1 year, I can count off the top of my head about 5 new taxes either that have increased or been introduced. So that seems a bit much, yeah.
All right. Let's now take the conversation to the exemptions. Of course, after the public outcry yesterday when the announcement was made, the CBN did announce that there have been 16 list exemptions. We'll come to talk about what these exemptions are. But would you say that this, in a way, exonerates Nigerians from multi-taxation? Is this a good enough response to this? And do you worry about, or do you have concerns about how this might in some way promote some form of money laundering?
Yeah, well, the exemptions, if you look at them, it's like if you're transferring money to yourself in a bank or towards yourself on the bank, that's the major exemption. So the idea being that if I create an account in all the banks in Nigeria, I don't pay this tax. So it's a bit funny because the main cost for Nigerians is food. So food is about 57% of the household budget in Nigeria. That is not exempted. It's also a regressive tax, so everyone pays the same. Dangote pays the same, I pay the same, you pay the same, irrespective of the income. So the exclusions are not really people-centered. It's just an exclusion. What we need to do, perhaps, is to maybe have a threshold and say, if you transfer more than this amount, then of course you have this tax applied. Maybe if you transfer more than 1 million or so, then the tax kicks in after that. So that's the problem. It's a regressive tax. Everyone's going to pay. The poor, the rich are going to pay the exact same rate. And of course, like you've mentioned, money laundering, people are going to open multiple accounts. I think that's just going too far. Why open multiple accounts just to avoid a fee? But my real fear is that tomorrow, next year, they're going to increase the taxes. Once a tax is introduced, then tomorrow the rate can be increased. So it can go from 0.05 to 1 to 2. So it might come back in 10 years' time and it's 2%. of transactions and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not sure why we need this particular tax, and if the NSA is the person in charge of the cybersecurity in Nigeria per se. So it looks like a bit far-fetched to me. This is just my opinion on the matter, except.
Yeah, I mean, but what would you, I mean, if their response is that, yes, they need some level of funding for, cybersecurity research, and the likes, and the NSC, of course, has that in one act here or there, in the Cybersecurity Act. And of course, the country needs money. How else are we going to make money to run the country? How would you respond to that? If that's what their defense is? And of course, how does this affect Nigeria's economic outlook generally?
Well, tax to GDP is very, very low. So that reflects the lack of the ability of the federal government and the state governments to collect taxes. What they're doing now is going to the banks and then using the banks as tax collection agencies. So we've got the electronic transfer fee from the banks. We now have this NSA from the banks. We have stamp duty also from the banks. So they're going to the banks and saying, banks collect monies for us. But overall, tax collection in Nigeria is still very, very low when compared to GDP. So if you want to raise revenues, then focus on tax collection, the normal tax collection on on incomes, on activities in the economy. So they've abandoned that push and they've come to the banks to overtax, in my opinion, the Nigerians that use banking services. Again, this drives away Nigerians away from the banks. It leads to a fall in financial inclusion. So if you want money, tax people, but this is just lots of taxes now on just the banking sector, and it's going to have a negative consequence down the line.
Now, if we start to look at these exemptions, I'm just going to run through a few of them very quickly. We have the exemption, loan disbursement and repayments, salary payments, intra-account transfers, which is where the opening multiple accounts comes up, intra-bank transfers between customers of the same bank. We go further down to 14, non-profit and charitable organizations. There's 16 different categories. With the current system that we run with our banking sector, do you think that we currently have the diligence, our banks have the diligence to be able to pay attention to know which fund is for salary, which fund is for this, such that they're not taxing a transaction that is under the exemption list? So with the level, with the experience you've seen in Nigeria of the way we run things, do we have the level of attention to detail that would ensure that we don't tax the wrong transactions?
Well, it's going to be how they code the systems. For instance, if you say salary and you code it 001, you could tell your system, any transaction coded 001, don't apply this tax. It's possible, like I said, but who pays salaries? The employers. So employers would get the tax relief because they are the ones paying salaries. What about me? So that means if I get a salary, my employer gets the relief. But if I then spend, I then pay that tax. If I buy Uber or buy food, then I pay the tax. So you see that most of the exemptions are going to go to the employers or to the larger transfers of funds. If I pay my loans, how many Nigerians do loans from a bank? Less than 5% of Nigerians have gotten a loan from a commercial bank. That's the numbers that we have. So the list of that you're showing right now, it doesn't really affect the quote unquote common man, right? We are going to pay a regressive tax. So if you're poorer, you're going to pay the exact same rate as an ED in a bank is going to pay. That's the point. So if there's no, should we say, progressive nature of this taxes, everyone's going to pay the 0.5 or the 0.05. Everyone pays the same, irrespective of your income level. That's really the main problem. These exemptions are not really going to affect the guys that are really going to pay this if they earn less than the folks that earn more. And that's where I think they missed it.
Yeah. So your major challenge is, first of all, the timing, and of course, the fact that Nigerians currently are overstretched, and then also the fact that, you don't agree that the CBN should be the one, being sent to, source funds for the country, basically to tax Nigerians and figure out where else we can get money for the country. But I also want, your response, because I see your social media interactions a lot. So I want your response to, or your thoughts on where we currently are with the Naira exchanging for 1,400. We seemed, or we thought that we were winning, with the exchange rate. It was getting close to 1,000 Naira. Everyone celebrated for one market day, and then, the next, we're heading back to 1004. What are your projections? Do you think it's heading back to 1008 again? Do you think we'll be able to, manage it where it currently is? Is Yemi Cardoso, finally, able to understand what needs to be done?
Well, look at it this way. The Naira is a derivative of crude oil. That means that if Nigeria pumps more crude oil and exports more crude oil, the Naira gains value. So the exchange rate is the result of the exam. And what's the exam? Exports, net export. The Naira is weak today because crude oil exports from Nigeria have not kept pace with the budget, with OPEC. That's what's going on. Our budget is 1.7. OPEC is 1.5. We're currently doing about 1.2, 1.3 with the fall in the Nigerian pipeline. As long as we don't have oil output increasing, the Naira cannot gain value because we don't have the dollar inflows coming in to support the Naira. Remittances now are the ones that are keeping Nigeria afloat, and of course, loans, foreign portfolio investment loans. But the cheapest, long-term, most stable form of FX influence in Nigeria is going to be crude oil exports. That's 89% of Nigeria's trade volume. So if we don't get oil up, the Naira does not rise. So when we see this short-term appreciations, that's when we get inflows away from the foreign portfolio investment or from a loan or from remittance. But it's up and down. It's up and down. We need to have consistent net export for a period. Then the speculators, the users of dollars can say, wow, Nigeria's getting inflow. There's no point to bet against the Naira. Then they fall off that speculative trend. But as long as it is right now, if demand is more than supply, of course, Naira is going to keep on weakening and dollar is going to keep on gaining strength. Don't forget, the US has not reduced rates. So as long as the US keeps its rates higher, it's going to be a net negative for the Naira.
And what this would then translate to is that the Naira, of course, keeps getting weaker, price of goods and services keep getting higher, and the average Nigerian is not able to afford it. So let's come to the average Nigerian and how all of this affects the everyday business person who's trying to make ends meet. If the central bank does not reverse this policy, what would it translate to? You've mentioned opening multiple accounts, and there have been those who have thought that the NGOs will now be used as an opportunity to quote-unquote launder money because they are within the exemption list. But how would this translate to the everyday Nigerian person who's trying to make ends meet?
In all honesty, I don't think the average Nigerian guy is going to open up more accounts to avoid this fee. They're going to absorb this cost. So it's going to see this cost is going to be inflationary. So this is just going to be one of those costs like VAT, which I can't avoid and I'm going to have to pay it. So if I then want to get more money, I can see if I can pass that cost across to you. And that, of course, then makes the cost of doing business in Nigeria go up. It's a bit, the fee is a bit too small to try to avoid it, but it's a bit too large to try to ignore it. That's just where we find ourselves with that. So I don't think you're going to see people doing NGOs or multiple accounts. They will just say it, but it's going to be a cost we have to absorb. The real effect is the fall in consumption. Every time you pay this fee, you have less money to consume. The big problem in Nigeria is a lack of consumption. There's no money to consume. No one can buy things. If we don't buy things, there are no jobs created. The economy does not expand. So the more you tax Nigerians, the more you are taking away disposable income from the families to spend and consume. And that lack of consumption is a huge problem in Nigeria today. So all these taxes, the mobile fee, the digital money fee, the sugar tax, all they do is take away cash from the households. So it affects the economy negatively because the consumers cannot spend. Without the consumers spending, you don't have the private sector creating jobs. So net to the economy, more taxes does not lead to that economic growth that we're looking for.
All right.
All right.
And another thing also would be then, I'd like to find out what your thoughts are regarding, we're starting to see, a number of foreign companies closing up shop. The most recent announcement, of course, being Microsoft, and how you think that this would impact our economy and how you think this would impact spending capabilities, because of course there have been projections as to the number of job losses that will be encountered as a result of this.
Yeah, that's a huge negative for us right there, that we have brand names, Glaxo, Sanofi, now Microsoft closing shop, right? I pulled up the Kenyan newspaper, and in Kenya, they are saying Microsoft is closing in Nigeria, but in Kenya, Microsoft is not closing. So you see, we're in competition. So what a foreigner would look at is, why is Microsoft leaving Nigeria and staying in Kenya? So they ask that question of us. Kenya looks like it's more, should we say, business friendly than Nigeria. So we then lose more. It's a vicious circle. But it's a very, very bad thing that we have all these companies leaving, and we've got to address it. There's something making them to leave, and what that thing is the cost of doing business in Nigeria. It's simply too high. We've got to face it head on. Have a meeting. What cost can we bring down? Give these guys a tax break. You can, there's something called the Laffer curve. The more you tax, the less income you get. The more you tax, the less income you get. It sounds counterintuitive, but when you overtax people, capital is mobile, it goes away. I'm not saying Microsoft's going to up taxes, but we've got to improve what we offer as Nigeria to these multinationals to attract them and to retain them in Nigeria. We have to do that priority number one. These guys are leaving, those are jobs and enterprise leaving Nigeria as well. So not a good one.
Yeah, I mean, but they're not the first. They're one of the handful that have pulled out of Nigeria in the last couple of years. And so you would expect that this thinking that you've just put out now will be, what the current administration would have in mind. But I don't know if that's what they have in mind. So what do you think, their policies, I mean, when they have their internal meetings and they see these companies moving out of Nigeria, do you think it bothers them? And what do you think their policies are that maybe have led to some of these companies realizing that Nigeria may just not be the place for them?
We're a very, very expensive place to do business. The airports in Lagos and Abuja are the most expensive in Africa to land a plane. If you have a helicopter, $300 is being proposed to just land a helicopter. Food is 40% inflation. Normal inflation in Nigeria is 33%. Interest rates very, very high. There's insecurity. Major index is up. So the fundamentals don't look good for Nigeria. The attributes we have, the cheap labor we have, we're not using it to advantage, right? It's safe. It's not safe to go on the roads in Nigeria because of the banditry. So you have a lot of things, headwinds, if you're a multinational in Nigeria. And what Nigeria has not done is to sell the good story that we have, right? We've got to come back and say, listen, we have the potentials of cheap power. We're not one of the few nations in the world that have not signed the minimum tax. So if you come to Nigeria, for instance, we can say we can give you zero taxes if you come to Nigeria. Of course, I haven't signed up to that minimum tax that the whole world has signed. So we've got to sell the story, like you've mentioned, when they go for the meetings. What is the situation? People are leaving. How can we bring them back? Reduce taxes. If you come to Nigeria, you're not going to pay a tax. We're going to give you the right to maybe pump gas. If you can pump the gas out of the ground, you can use it, quote unquote, for free. You've got to give incentives so investors come to Nigeria and stay in Nigeria. We are competing with Africa, with the rest of the world for business. Even the US is looking for FDI. So we can't say we're a big nation and then don't attract investors. We've got to go out and attract and retain.
Yeah, but the thing is, I mean, that should be the thinking, and if you look across the president's media page, for example, on X, there are a lot of these claims of attracting foreign investment. He's just landed from the Netherlands, of course, and Saudi Arabia in the last couple of days where he's been visiting. And of course, having these discussions, attracting foreign investment. They claim $250 million is coming in from here, $100 million investments coming in here, this and that. So will that be enough to justify their seeming lack of interest when a Microsoft decides to pull out? If they say that, well, Mr. President, is having these bilateral meetings and he is, bringing these companies to invest in the country.
Not really. Companies don't invest because the president goes and talks to them. If you notice how companies work, they have a board, they have a research department, they have heads of department, even a CEO. It's usually a very, very long process that has happened before the president is advised, I want to invest in your country. The point I'm making is this: if a Dutch company decides to invest in Nigeria, that decision was taken a year or two ago, then you then know about it today because now it's now going to be implemented. So to flying around the world looking for investors is actually a wrong way, because you're not going to bump into a guy in an elevator and say, hey, come to Nigeria. And they say, yeah, sure, we'll come to Nigeria. You've got to, in Nigeria, do your policies and do your marketing. They will see it offshore and then they will come and try it out. And if it works, they come. So like what Rwanda is doing, make the cost of business low, make the ease and productivity of doing this in your country up. The investors will come. You don't go look for them, right? They come because they want to make money, and they want to make money by paying lower costs and selling to a large market. So we have that attribute of a large market if the market can spend. So focus on reducing costs in Nigeria. If you do that, the foreigners will come. You don't have to go look for them, right? The largest FDI we had in Nigeria was about 2011 or so. We're at 8.8 billion FDI. So if we look at the travels of the president then in 2011 and the travels of the president today, you can ask yourself, do foreign travels bring in FDI? The answer is no. You've simply got to make your country investable and investments come in. That there is a long process for FDIs. It does not happen because you fly to a conference. That's when it is announced. But when it starts, you're not aware because it starts in their strategy room. So make your country good, and then the folks will come and invest.
And from where you stand so far, do we have the necessary quote-unquote publicity to attract foreign investors? Have we told, have we made the country look good so far? That's one part of the question. When you answer, then I'll ask you the next part.
We have noticed. It's evident that if you just Google Nigeria, what are the keywords that come to you? That just tells you the idea. We used to advertise on CNN and all that kind of stuff. We used to host international media here. But now we don't have that brand name that we can say this is what Nigeria is known for. So we've really gone down the mark. We used to be the largest economy in Africa. That used to be our calling card. Now we're no longer the largest economy in Africa. So we have not attracted investment. Cost of business is still high, and the perception in Nigeria has not improved positively.
All right. I think my final question to you would be your assessment of this current administration. I want to believe that so far, we haven't told the story yet that we should tell about Nigeria to attract foreign investors. What the current administration has said is that we should tighten our seatbelts and just endure for a little longer. Things will get better. Experts did project that things will pick up by Q3, some say Q4. So do you think that with the way we're running things right now, that all the policies that have been implemented by the current administration would aid some form of economic recovery by the end of 2024, by Q3, Q4? Or does it look like right now it's just all set for doom?
I don't think, look at it this way. When they came in, they had some very, very bold policies on fuel subsidy and the Naira exchange policy. Very, very bold. If they had stuck with that, we would have reaped the benefits today. But we've gone back to pay subsidies, even the fuel, even the dollar policy. We tried to strengthen the Naira artificially a few weeks ago. So it's like we've gone back on those policies. We've not been bold. We've not been fast enough. That's the problem. And the optics have not changed. They say one thing, but they do another thing. They say tighten your seatbelts, then we hear of 2 presidential jets breaking down because they are flying abroad. I haven't seen any optics that if people can say, wow, my president is doing this, so I'm going to copy my president. Listen, in Argentina, their president is flying commercial. It doesn't save money, it's a gimmick, but perception matters. When people see the president saving costs, it translates down the down circle. National Assembly is importing SUVs, right? Because they say they cannot cut a penny from their budget. So the perception, the optics, the Nigerians believe that the government is not working for them. Costs keep on going up, and then you have that malaise with the fundamentals of the economy, which are not very, very strong. That's what's going on. You need a positive story. The administration needs success. They need to get something that they've done very, very well and sell it and then go from there. Right now, it's difficult to point to a place where they can say, on this, we have solved this problem, we have fixed it, and on this, we're going to build the rest of our economic agenda. For now, it seems that we're grouping and the optics don't look good at all. They need to move faster with more direction. They've got to focus on human capital issues, not capital projects that are large and the people can't feed. Focus squarely on human development issues. People have got to eat before they can drive a car on a good road.
All right. Hello, Ajam. It's a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for stopping by. And of course, looking forward to more conversations. We'll see how Nigeria's economy goes in the next couple of weeks or months. Thanks for your time.
My pleasure.